So as we all know, Zelensky went on his world tour reaching out to European leaders and politicians for further aid to continue on this ridiculous war in Ukraine. However, in the British Parliament, one Jeremy Corbyn expressed concern over the prospect of British troops being deployed in Ukraine. And I think it's important that we hear his words because while you have that nutless wonder Bernie Sanders calling for war, Jeremy Corbyn is saying something else completely different. So let's play this video.
We all want to see an end to this ghastly conflict in the Ukraine. We all want to see an end to the loss of so much innocent civilian life, as well as, of course, the deaths of soldiers of all sides. Can I take him back to the answer he gave to the member for Leeds East earlier? Under what circumstances does he envisage British troops being deployed in Ukraine? And what circumstances does he envisage them taking part in fighting activity against a belligerent? And will he guarantee that any such decision will come to the House before any such decision is taken?
Well, I thank him for his question. There's one person that doesn't want lasting peace in Ukraine, and that's Putin. And that we have to hold centrally in mind. And that is why we need security guarantees in place, because Putin's ambitions show that if there is a deal, he won't keep it unless the security guarantees in place. So the guarantees are the guarantees, not of conflict, but of peace, which is, I think, what everybody in this House wants, including the Right Honourable Member. Of course, it's right that this House should have details and discussion of any security guarantees and the right to express its view, and I'll ensure that that happens.
All right. So I just want to pull this up here. This was written by Jeremy Corbyn. Mariah was just 31 years old when she was forced to seek a refugee camp. And again, this was, guns before butter. Running a government where starving children and freezing pensioners is the price to pay for funding endless war. Keir Starmer's only legacy will be a more dangerous, unequal world. She was forced to seek refugee in a camp, a mother of 4 and expecting a 5th. Mara was one of 4.5 million people in Yemen displaced by the Saudi-led war and one of 21 million people in need of urgent humanitarian aid. Conflict had compound an already dire famine in a country ravaged by drought, causing widespread malnutrition. One day, while fetching water, Mara collapsed. With the help of UN-funded healthcare, Mara survived. Her unborn child did not. On Tuesday, MP after MP stood up in Parliament to defend the Prime Minister's enormous annual increase in defense spending. Did any of them stop for a moment to think about what this actually means? Since 2015, more than half of Saudi Arabia's combat aircraft used for the bombing raids were supplied by the United Kingdom. Over that period, British arms companies earned more than 6 billion British pounds in sales. Even before Britain started bombing Yemen directly in 2024, it was providing the weapons for a campaign that killed more than 150,000 people from military action and left hundreds of thousands more dead from disease and famine. This is the reality of defense spending. The government has been widely criticized for cutting foreign aid to fund its increase in military spending, and rightly so. This decision will not just harm the victims of war, like those in Yemen, but will fuel the very conditions that led to war in the first place. 8 in 10 of the world's poorest countries are suffering or have recently suffered from violent conflict. A grown-up approach to foreign policy would look at the underlying causes of war and alleviate them. This government is choosing to accelerate the cycle of insecurity and war instead. It was only this month that the government published videos bragging about deportation of illegal immigrants, parroting right-wing attacks on asylum seekers. Now, by spending more on bombs and spending less on aid, the government is actively pursuing a strategy it knows will increase displacement. This may appear contradictory, but it makes perfect sense for a government intent on abandoning vulnerable people home and abroad. Cutting foreign aid was a tough choice, we were told. So too was cutting winter fuel allowance, cutting disability benefits, and keeping 2 children benefit cap. Why is it that the tough choices always seem to hit the poor? We will look back at this decision in years to come and take stock of its lasting catastrophic consequences. If the Prime Minister wants to take pride in militaristic jingoism, then he must accept the shame of a more unstable, unequal world it helps create. Perhaps he should take a moment to pause, reflect, and ask himself what happened to the last time a Labour Prime Minister appointed himself the Messiah of the free world. This month was the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Reflecting on the deadly daily grind of First World War-style trench warfare, I asked a simple question in Parliament. Could we, just for a moment, take a moment to reflect on the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been lost? From the beginning, I opposed Russia's invasion and called for an end to the conflict as soon as possible to save human life. 3 years on, hundreds of thousands of grieving mothers later, I renewed his call. There is no glory to war. There is only death and destruction. When leaders neglect to use the language of peace, they should remember that it's those who are sent to die on the battlefield who end up paying the price. Meanwhile, the government is failing to tackle what is by far the largest threat to global security, climate disaster. As we speak, people are dying from droughts and floods, yet their lives aren't deemed important for emergency press conferences outside Downing Street. They don't have a place in a macho political strategy based on beating one's chest in the name of war. Instead, the government's thoughts are reserved for those who profit from destruction. This week, the defense secretary said that the military spending can be a driver of economic growth. What he really means is that taxpayers' money will be paid directly to arms companies. If the government was really interested in building a safer world, it would understand that there is no such thing as growth on a dead planet and spend $13.4 billion on species-saving resources like renewable energy instead. The next time a politician tells you they need to increase defense spending to keep people safe, think of people like Mariah. Apologies for the stutter. Think of people like Mariah, forced to escape British-made bombs. Think of the children in this country going hungry because money that could have been spent on their food is being spent on weapons and bombs instead. Security is not the ability to destroy your neighbor. Security is the ability to get on with your neighbor. Think of the kind of society we could build if politicians had the slightest interest in building a world of peace, which they don't. And in turn, this is where you have nutless wonders like Bernie Sanders, neocon Bernie, who won't call Israel's assault on Gaza a genocide. I'm ashamed I voted for you. I'm ashamed.
Do you think that President Zelensky needs to resign in order for there to be a peace deal?
I think that is a horrific suggestion. Zelensky is leading a country trying to defend democracy against an authoritarian dictator, Putin, who invaded his country. And I think millions of Americans are embarrassed, are ashamed that you have a president of the United States who says that Ukraine started the war, that Zelensky is a dictator. He's got it exactly backwards. The people of Ukraine have lost tens of thousands of soldiers. Their cities are being bombed as we speak. And our job is to defend the 250-year tradition that we have of being the democratic leader of the world, not turn our backs on a struggling country that is trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, okay. Bernie Sanders, the big cuck himself. I think he should take some notes from one Jeremy Corbyn, but I guess he's just too foolish to really even acknowledge the real dangers of what a continuous war in Ukraine would look like. People are starving, people are dying en masse. And yet we have these people promoting war, doing it all the time, every time. All the best to Jeremy Corbyn, at least he's being reasonable there. But we'll see how this entire conflict plays out. Zelensky, after his fallout with Trump, went to Europe, went to London, talked to all the European leaders for more continuous aid for this conflict can go on. But as we covered early on in this segment, Trump and his administration want to continue talks with Russia to end this conflict. Things are beginning to wrap up. The music is coming to an end.
If you fool me once, it's because I didn't think a guard was needed. If you fool me twice, it's because I didn't learn the lesson, so it bears repeating. If you try the same play 3 times running, it's because you know what's coming, and you didn't come to lead, you came to purposefully be misleading. Democracy is dry. It's been a century bleeding. The husk is gaping open to the sky, out in the field where all the sheep just keep on circling and worrying and bleeding. They're waiting for the shepherd that they've tried to hide their faith in, but he's so appealing. They'd gladly give their fleece. It's such a freeing feeling that even when he leads them to the ledge and starts to urge them on, they're positively beaming. They were told that they were on their way to save democracy, so even as they plummet, they just gloat. They don't consider screaming. And halfway up the cliff, the shepherd's cozy little mittens wrap around the staff of shattered human hopes on which he's leaning. He shows the gentle grin that used to stir your inner spark, and he says, "Not me, us," as he gestures to the oligarchs. He knows that if he runs, they're going to stop him like a stolen car. And he'll easily surrender because it bought a lot of time for laying mines in all the grassroots. Suddenly, the tiniest of movements gets you blown apart. Suddenly, you're in a play that's set on an election day and voting for the fire, unaware you're playing Joan of Arc. Suddenly, the shepherd pulls the rug and slips a hood across your clueless mug, and everything goes zero dark. I'm gonna warn you once more before it's 2024 and you fuck around and find out who your heroes are. To take a step back from the herd and you'll learn that you can spot who all the shearers are. If you really want to know the product that they're selling, I can take you where the mirrors are. If you think your voice is finally ready, I can tell you where the lyrics are. I hid them in a box I had to bury neath the cobble when they carpet bombed the promenade and raided all the street bazaars. Now all we've got's the marketplace, and you're too broke to even bother asking what the options for your treatment are. Suddenly, the raw debris of homeless human dignity will find it has 100 teeth for every badge and sweeper's arm. Suddenly, they speak in solidarity and each is armed. Suddenly, the sheep can see the shepherd for his truest form and all pitch in at once to help him buy the farm. And now it's zero dark. And all is calm and peaceful save the distant wail of sirens that approach beside the flames of dawn. Suddenly, the carrot's just a string that's on a stick, and all your movements make you sick because the prize is gone. Now, we could go and flee into the forest low and meek, or we can exercise our right to feast and go and graze on Biden's lawn. Because he's been sowing seeds that seep a toxin out to sap a bit from each of us and keep on leaching decades after Biden's gone. So regardless who they summon out of hell to come and do the job, it will not feel like Biden's gone. But in that time of hopelessness, you cannot trust the shepherd when he once again comes asking you to humor him his siren song. And it's cute that you can innocently, honestly assume that's just a symptom of a system that was wired wrong, and not the standard feature, basic function, primary objective of a mass hypnosis firebomb. You don't need to know the words to cry along. Someday it'll hit you like an officer who pistol whipped their ride along. Broke his jaw and kept his job and kept it moving right along. That voting isn't red or blue or black or white or right or wrong. Voting's like a firing squad where you can choose the firearm. It's slow extinction by and large. It's Super Tuesday supercharged. It's all your futures, roots and all, just tossed out on a garbage barge. It's everybody dropping out to push the biggest oligarch. It's everybody voting fire, registered as Joan of Arc.